playing for is not just the prize pool, but also the last chance for some of these players to get a Grandmaster spot. So I know there's a lot of people to follow, not just the ones that you see on broadcast. You can check out their deck list there.
I'm not backing down.
All right, game is ready, Raven. Let's do it. Game number 1.
We're in. At last, let's go. Okay, already Illidari Studies being kept there as a single keep for Alutemu. Makes sense to me. Very usable card early on, and of course can dig for some more card draw, which is what he will want. But I think that was a natural draw on Il'gynoth, which is a little bit rough for Alutemu there, just being going to be stuck in his hand a bit too early, especially if he gets hold of a skull soon. Means that it's going to be very difficult to get a discounted skull off. Whereas Lee, starting the game, Dan, just skull's already in place. That's already organized and dealt with. It's just going to get there now.
Yeah, it's huge. And there's also the fact that he has Illidari Studies to make that cheaper, and then even on the coin. So an opportunity to get it out as soon as turn 4. That's massive. From Lee's perspective, how do you want to set everything up until that point? Playing Illidari Studies now, I can't imagine that he would want to pick too many things that would change how he wants to set up this skull. Does pick up Star Student Stelina, which could also be a really big card too, because if you know your opponent is setting up for a really powerful turn, you can just use that Stelina for some good disruption.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as well, because if Lee gets vision at some point on the Il'gynoth, then he'll have a good idea of, 1, whether he wants to put it back in the deck, or 2, because he'll have known where it is. But potentially, at least, he can see that it's, maybe been in hand nice and early, which, before a skull's even been played. So maybe there's a value of actually keeping it at full mana there. So you're going to see Alutemu just easily get rid of that throw glaive, clear up the minion, and not have to worry too much.
I also think wondering if there's anything else he wants to do with the last remaining mana, perhaps the Illidari Studies to set things up. But, as we know, Illidari Studies is also relevant the turn that you do play it on, in case you want to use it for its mana cost. Second ooze, okay.
Yeah, I think that's important for Alutemu to do now, is he might actually want to Illidari Studies into Skull, in which you'll want to play it on the same turn, so the Skull's on the far side. Because otherwise, again, that Il'gynoth is going to put a bit of a block on being able to get the Outcast Skull.
Does get an opportunity to play Philosophy in the Outcast and get a second Moarg as well. Thinking about if you want to even push out the Ethereal Augmersion, hand space is something to consider. You even saw Lee do something like that by throwing out the Moarg tempo on 2. It's not crucial for Lee's success to have every single Moarg Artificer possible, but it is important that he keeps his hand flexible. As you can see that both players are considering doing, like we said, some pretty weird stuff. You usually want to be holding your combo pieces, but in this kind of matchup, Alutemu's even highly considered dumping it. Chooses to hold.
Yeah, it's really tricky, because without a set plan ready, it's kind of hard for Alutemu, because it's not as if he has a skull in hand or has other card draw that you can say, okay, if I dump this turn, I'll have enough space to draw this next turn, and so on. So it's a little bit more difficult for Alutemu to just throw cards away if he can't guarantee having the draw he needs. He does get Spectral Sight, which I imagine is going to be looked at. I guess Sigil Runner will be 0, and he can just throw it out there now. But for Lee, just being able to coin to Skull, and now he has even more card draw, 1 mana Raging Fell Screamer. Like, it's looking very, very good for him so far.
So Spectral Sight, of course, on the surface, the best form of card draw. It's just has more upside than the Crimson Sigil Runner, unless you're trying to squeeze in more mana. Part of me wonders if Alutemu just wants to start thinking about damage, because he already has all the combo pieces, right? So to speak. He has the Il'gynoth and the Moarg Artificers, and even some spell damage. That being said, he doesn't have any of the spells that are relevant for it. He still doesn't even have, any discounts, which are really important to getting those combo pieces up. So I don't really think it's possible, but I like that he at least hesitated and thought about how he wants to utilize his Outcast. He's actually going to hold onto the Spectral Sight and commit to this board state, trying to make it a little bit trickier for Lee to handle this board. And so he can get his card draw going that way with the Blood Mage Thanos on the board. That being said, this starts with Selena and shuffle in one of these 3 minions that show up with the Augmerge and the Artificer and the Il'gynoth.
Yeah, and you get some good knowledge there, right? He gets to see what at least a spread of minions is in hand. But I'm very interested to see whether he wants Alutemu to keep the Il'gynoth in hand.
Maybe.
So he knows, I mean, he's knew about this Artificer for a while because he saw the Philosophy copy it. I think it's fine to leave Il'gynoth there in the hand because Il'gynoth is a dead card until you activate the combo, right? And the longer it stays in the hand, the more likely that's going to be put into an outcast position it's difficult to cast from. So I think that's all right. But so in Lee's mind, picking the Artificer is going to make it trickier for Alutemu to commit to that combo and make Il'gynoth a relevant card.
Right.
I grow
And it's just
impatient.
if it's not reduced, it makes the combo so much harder to do, or at least so much more limited for Alutemu there. So I do like that from Lee. And now Alutemu's in that awkward spot. He has Spectral Sight. He can just go with an I-Beam now to kill off the student. Outside of that, he's lacking card draw. And without the card draw, he's not going to be able to get to the actual combo finishers. Even with that, he needs Philosophy or something to get more Moargs as well. It's looking pretty tough.
Wow. Really interesting set of lines here for Alutemu, who was hoping that he would set up for a banked mana from the Illidari studies into a Skull of Gul'dan. It didn't work out. He hasn't really gotten the Spectral Sight to draw cards. He's now allowing Selena to stay on the board to get some additional damage without committing to the I-Beam because he wants to see if he can get a little bit more value out of his cards. He just feels very behind in this matchup right now. And it's not over, but it's certainly an uphill climb. It tells you the story of the card draw resources and even the deck size, right? Like Lee is very far ahead in terms of those departments.
Yeah, there's always that chance though, right? Because you could see Lee now just dropping the Arcanist and drawing more, because there is the world where the Il'gynoth is like bottom card and Alutemu just rips the perfect next 2 to 3 cards off the top, and then he's fine and he wins because he's already got Il'gynoth, he's already got the Moarg, he's already got some spell damage. But Lee is in general doing a lot better, right? The card draw is insane so far. Well, okay.
That's exactly what he's looking for if he's not finding the game-ending damage series of draws. And he finds a 0-mana Moarg, which is pretty huge if he gets an opportunity to Philosophy for that. Does have a board clear with the double Immolation Auras, or even just 1 Immolation Aura plus the spell damage. But has to think about how he wants to use his remaining mana crystals, because I think using the Spectral Sight for the draw is more valuable in his eyes because he wants to set up for a win. He's actually very close to killing. But he's lacking the damage of the AoE from Fellscream Blast. That's the best way to activate the combo. Right now he only has I-Beam, so it's not optimal at all in terms of getting the combo out right now.
And although a lot of his combo pieces cost the full amount, he doesn't need tons of them to be able to do the combo, right? Lee's already on 27. It's not as if Alutemu needs to deal 70 or 70 whatever in a given turn, right? He's getting close to being able to do like one of the lowest forms of the combo. Lee's hand is very full right now.
Maybe.
Trying to count to see how much damage Alutemu would have if he drew a Fellscream Blast off the top of his deck, because he would have Il'gynoth, a 0-mana Moarg, the opportunity to play a Talented Arcanist, then Fellscream Blast, and I don't know if he can squeeze the I-Beam in either because of the outcast position. It might be a little bit tricky. Kind of focusing back on Lee, though, because it is his turn. He has some hand space issues, and we kind of talked a little bit about the dump. Look at him. He's going to use the I-Beam on his own Blade Mage Thalnos with the additional benefit that it draws, or rather it heals him back up to 30. Does end up dumping even more cards. The second Immolation Aura being used. And Alutemu does not pick up the Fellscream Blast.
Yeah, this makes sense. Like I said, Leo will want to drop tons of cards just so he can keep drawing. He needs to get to that Il'gynoth to be able to do something soon. And he also knows that Alutemu does have that full cost Il'gynoth, which means that the combos he can do are reasonably limited right now. Especially after seeing the double immolation aura. So he knows that 2 of the skull discounts are on that, which effectively does nothing about the combo.
I think Alutemu right now is evaluating the acrobatics versus the double jump. Both draw cards, just they do functionally different things on this turn because double jump curates from your deck a specific outcast card. And if you were to hit a Skull Gul'dan, does he even have the opportunity to play the cards that he's really looking for right now? Immediately finds a Jockey Warblades and a Fellscreen Blast, which I think, because he's going to 9 mana, does have the combo the following turn. Oh, he's going to heal himself out just to make sure that he doesn't die to a combo?
I don't know if he needed to do that.
So what I liked about the Adraki Warblade was that it also set up, not only, of course, is a heal for him, but it also sets up the lifesteal with the Il'gynoth the following turn. Now without the Talented Arcanist, he's got Moarg, Ethereal Aug Merchant, plus a Fellscreen Blast, which is 2 double 8, 24, 25. He gets the hero power. I think he's short.
Right, and for me, he had the mana. If he'd done the Eldraki Warblades, obviously he would have had less health, right? So that's the trade-off. But he would have had the mana to do that turn, the combo turn, but with the Arcanist, right, as well. And just not hero power.
Yeah, it could have been that maybe Alutemu didn't want to use the Arcanist and want to use the Aug Merchant. It could have been a slight misclick there. There could be a few different ways that Alutemu meant to set this up, because it seemed like it was intentional up until the point where he realized what happened and then did what many other players do, which is shake the head and try to look away from the screen, but you realize you have to look at the screen because you need to stay engaged because the game's not over yet. It's very awkward, to say the least. Regardless, I don't think Alutemu, by my count, has lethal right now, so he has to hope that something from the top of his deck can do that, otherwise this game continues.
I think that was... okay. I'm worried as well that I cursed Lee by saying that it could be one of those games that Il'gynoth is bottom card, as he's already down to 5 and we've not seen it yet. And as soon as he draws it, Alutemu is very dead.
So Glide is a really interesting card to think about, but ends up finding Starter Student Selena. Either of them are fine, right? It's disruption to the game plan. I was thinking about Glide, but it messes up his own combo and he's so close to winning.
Right.
Oh, this is interesting.
I think he dumps the Fellscreen Blast. Right?
Right.
Like, that's got to be the best single, because like one Moarg will, a lot of the time, you only need 2. So maybe he's got X amount in hand, or he's got a Philosophy as well, so suddenly he's back up to 2 Moargs or 3 Moargs again. I do think dumping the Fellscreen Blast is important, because that's one card that equates to an absurd amount of the burst damage, right?
Oh, you're totally right. So, Warblades it is. Now the benefit is, I think this does set up lethal, because he now has the weapon to double up on the lifesteal on the following turn, except Lee has the second ooze, so a little short-lived. And now, does Lee find a discounted Il'gynoth? He does. He is going to kill next turn if he draws that Fellscreen Blast, because I think the one thing that's missing from his side is that Fellscreen Blast. Although, I mean, I'm looking at his hand, maybe there's just a kill purely off of a really souped-up I-beam that I can't immediately calculate, given that he has another Jockey Warblade to swing this turn and also swing the following turn.
Well, also Philosophy, right? Like, I think
yes.
Triple Moarg Arcanist and still swing and go I-beam, so...
Right.
He should be okay for lethal next turn.
Okay. Not going to take any chances. Says, I have a very good chance that I'll draw Fellscreen Blast next turn. Going to heal up to 30. Alutemu picks up the Warblades. I still don't count lethal. 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 mana to play all of the combo pieces in his hand as well, or rather maximize his damage, and that still wouldn't get across the finish line. It's a really tough spot for Alutemu too, because there's other things he has to acknowledge. He has to acknowledge that there's an acidic swamp on the board. Adds damage.
Alas, poor warlock.
Okay, 0 mana Chaos Strike can help here, just to heal him a little bit more.
Okay, well, all these things that got discounted are actually pretty solid, but I think he's just a turn too late here. And I mean, Lee has the 2 Moargs, the Philosophy, so he's going to times 8 plus the spell damage. I mean, if Lee just draws the Velstream Blast, this game is super over.
Yeah, Alutemu is going to do what he can to try and survive here and go to max health.
Cross your fingers. Hope that he just doesn't have the Fellscream Blast that you shuffled in. That's pretty much his only hope. Nah, there's just no way. Yeah, Lee's got this, and you can kind of see the disappointment on Alutemu's face. He knows it more than anybody, before anybody even probably recognized exactly what was going on.
Yeah, really tricky game there for both players, honestly. Like, Lee had all the card draw but couldn't get to Il'gynoth. Alutemu got to Il'gynoth too quickly and struggled a little bit with the card draw and struggled with just about getting enough damage pressured earlier. I do think that earlier turn where Eldrazi could have come down was probably the turn that Alutemu needed to risk it and just play Eldrazi, heals for a little bit less but pushes more damage and sets up a higher amount of burst the turn after. Definitely not casting language hacker, as far as I'm aware anyway. But yeah,
listen,
that was a...
Language hacker's a free agent, needs as much camera time as possible, so we're trying to run the phone here.
Just put his picture up everywhere. Yeah, a big win for Lee though, because Demon Hunter Mirror is very, very tricky to navigate, especially in weird matchups like that. And he gets off to a good lead, 1-0 so far, and now he's just got his Token Druid and his Warrior to go with, and I imagine he's just going to be feeling pretty confident after that performance.
Yeah, it just gotta be a bummer for Alutemu, who, you know, had the pieces to kind of put it together, and I think it really was just a Talented Arcanist versus the Ethereal Aug Merchant, because the +2 spell damage, when you double it twice, is a huge deal, as opposed to just one in terms of amplifying your damage. At least in terms of providing outs, because at the time, Alutemu didn't have the Fellscream Blast, so obviously it's playing off of what he can inevitably draw. But seeing the way that panned out, I'm sure he's got a little bit of regrets going into it. That's okay. Mistakes happen. Even the best, it happens to them. So Alutemu is going to turn to Token Druid. Very clean 2 of lists. It's always makes my little Hearthstone heart warm and happy when I see such a clean deck list, Raven. Just 2 ofs across the board, no little shenanigans. That being said, I do feel like it's nice to throw in the 1-ofs in tournaments to really put your opponent, you know, off kilter a little bit. I really like Resizing Pouch, for example, as like a tournament deck list, so that you can always have this opportunity to play 2 and out in an unusual situation.
Yeah, and it is Token Druid though, right? You want to be as consistent as the deck will allow you, and it is the comfort food deck of the Asia Pacific region, as well as those players have been piloting this since pretty much the beginning at this point, and we'll see how it plays out. It's going to be going up against Lee's Rush Warrior, and just taking a quick look at the list, interestingly enough, Lee including 1 Ogremancer, which hasn't really been messed around with for quite a while now, especially with the assumption that, you know, Priest is going to be banned out, Mage is not quite the threat that it was you know, a fair few weeks back now. So interesting choice of the 1 Ogremancer, 1 Cult Neophyte, but in this specific matchup, Frodan, it might pay off.
It's really interesting, right? Because on the one hand, this looks a little bit like an older deck list of the Rush Warrior, as if the Wailing Caverns expansion didn't come out, right? There's no Crash, there's no Mutinous, there's none of these like mid-range threats that people were experimenting with a lot. And it's just like the old lists with the Cult Neophyte, but also throwing in a couple of curveballs that I personally love. The Venomous Scorpion, for example. You don't see that and every single Rush Warrior list. And that little mix-up, we talked about card generation could be an MVP in these one-off tournament situations where you only get to play, 5, 6, 10 games of a deck. Maybe it ends up becoming huge. So I really love the spice that Lee is bringing with some of the tech. I think that's the kind of stuff that helps you influence tournament victories a lot more than people give it credit for than just bringing what's good on ladder.
Right, yeah, and it's why a lot of the time when players ask about, for example, Grandmaster decks, it's like, look, they are good lists, but they're not necessarily the best on ladder because they're not playing ladder, right? They're trying to beat a specific field. On ladder, you can queue against literally any class. That's unlikely. For example, a few weeks back, you're not going to face as much Paladin, right, going forward after the nerf. So it's an interesting take there from Lee just to bring a slightly sort of more old school warrior list. But again, like I said, those tech choices might just be clutch in this specific matchup of going against Token Druid. Neophyte can lock out huge turns from that deck. The Ogremancer, if it's landed at a reasonable point and not already dead on board, that can be a huge problem. So you never know, it might just be this might be the game where the tech choices just make it worthwhile and help Lee just get this extra win in this round.
Yeah, but you do have to ask some of the questions, Raven, like at what cost, right? Like all these tech cards are really fun, putting an Ogremancer, a Cult Neophyte, the Venomous Scorpids, but what are you taking out? And the first thing, the main exclusion that catches my eye is cards like Tent Trasher are no longer there. So it just makes Ringmaster Watley a little less consistent. It makes your just get him plan a lot weaker, right? To just curve out and try to pressure your opponent that Rush Warrior can actually pull off at a reasonable amount of time. And so while there's a lot of cutesy stuff, it sometimes just lacks some real punching power if you're not able to really get those things rolling the way Rush Warrior wants. And we see what happens when Rush Warrior falls significantly behind without actually a lot of power. They end up just struggling a lot to close out the game because they didn't deal as much damage in the early game. Their opponent's at like 20 health, and they're playing like Alexstrasza and Troublemaker without actually threatening to kill.
Right.
The real power of Rush Warrior is that you're afraid of Troublemaker and Alexstrasza because it sets up the kill. And if you're busy playing 1/3s that get you Brawl or Rancor or any these defensive spells, it's like cool, but it's not really pressuring the way you want. So I do see the downsides of it, and I hope it doesn't really bite Lee too much because I do like to see some cool preparation be rewarded.
It's also tough, right, just with the lack of card draw for Warrior as well. And as you mentioned earlier, because they're cutting Tent Trashers, then that's less to draw from Watley, but also just draw in general because you're not thinning the deck as much. Then you might not even get to the Ogremancer, you might not even get to the Neophyte. It's less rush minions to draw from, say, Stage Dive and so on. So it might all add together to just be not enough. But we are in the game now. Again, apologies for the delay. I do believe we just want to make sure that all the players are completely good to go before we start the game. But let's get into it right now. Looks like a Gibberlin opening is there as potential for Alutemu, Dan.
Yep, the Gibberling on the coin, always something that you're happy to see as the Druid, but love a little bit extra oomph to it to make sure it sticks. Over on Lee's side, going to start off with the Athletic Studies. Find some pretty bad stuff. Honestly, when the Rusty Raider is probably his best choice against Token Druid, but if that's your best choice, it's not a great sign. However, there's a caveat that Lee can play 2 Athletic Studies before his first rushing minion. Oh my gosh, what is he draws? So maybe the discount ends up being good enough. And hey, didn't find the Tent Trasher in the deck naturally. Maybe just a normal Tent Trasher could do on turn 3.
Yeah, I mean, it looks good to me, right? It's going to activate the Stage Dive for the turn after. It's a 3-mana 5/5 when your opponent's not done much yet. And yes, Alutemu could pop off next turn for all Lee knows, but still it's as unlikely as it's ever going to be that Alutemu makes a huge board next turn. And even if he makes 1 to 2 minions, Tent Trasher is going to be able to clean that up, or at least challenge it. And best case scenario, if Alutemu does nothing and passes again, then maybe Lee just gets to stick this 5/5. Wow, he's actually going for Bumper Car. I'm shocked.
That's really interesting. I mean, he thought about it for a very long time, and what this tells me is that Lee is playing into what he might draw next, which is if he gets Playmaker, for example, then this bumper card jumps up a ton in value. If he finds Parade Leader, he can Parade Leader, then Stage Dive, and then play bumper card. So there's a lot of upside to it. And if you think about what Ten Trasher does, part of what Ten Trasher's power is to pressure the life total if it goes unchecked. But this is a matchup where I think Lee is obviously favoring board control tactics, which is the most important aspect against Token to ensure that it doesn't get out of control. So the more I think about it, the more I really like where Lee's decision making is, because it's not just playing like, well, I'm just going to play a big idiot on 3. I want to actually address the biggest threat to me in the next couple of turns, because Alutemu hasn't played a single card. That's scary, right? Like, your opponent has a lot of cards, and it's a low-curve deck. He's clearly planning something.
If Lee had conditioning in hand, we could talk. But all I see is a 1-8 when it could have been a 5-5 this turn. And it can pressure the health of your opponent as well as just trade well on board as, again, Token Druid to get minions to 5 attack. It's quite a big ask a lot of the time. So, I don't know. I think I still like the 10 Trasher for me, but we will see if these bumper cards can pay off. Now with the Parade Leader pickup, you know, we can talk, right? Bumper card does benefit very, very much from Parade Leader.
Yeah, this is nice for Lee because at least the Parade Leader will warrant some kind of response. So Alutemu, for example, if ended playing a Lunar Eclipse, doesn't get the opportunity to, or at least if he doesn't have it, then he might have his board answered very easily. In this case, Glowfly Swarm still summons almost a full board. Lee finds Warmaul Challenger, can pretty much pick apart the 3 minions here, or rather the 3 minions because he has the bumper card and the Warmaul Challenger, and go from there. That's the first play that I saw. I wonder if Lee is willing to stage dive, because the upside of stage dive is super high. It's actually game winning if you hit Blade Master Samuro, but you can't. There's just no way you can guarantee that reliably.
Let's have a look. There's a Crab Rider. There's Rakara, Samuro, Runthak. So there's not actually that many. Yeah, he did go for it. I think with, 1 in 4 chance or so for Blade Master, I think it's probably worth going for it. It's going to hurt a little bit that now he missed and has to float a mana, but the payoff was potentially incredible.
That is actually one of the most interesting things about this deck list here from Lee, which is that he's taken out a couple of the rushers to play other stuff. So it's less like your Rush Warrior, which incidentally makes cards like Stage Dive a lot more powerful because it's more consistent in what it draws. So that's really fascinating to think about in terms of evaluating a card like Stage Dive and how it interacts with your deck building process when you're teching in and out things like Ten Trasher. Today I learned.
And I'm wondering if there's any kind of like weird-ish solar into Luna style play here just to get through that 2-8, because now it's been buffed by the Rakara effect. A 2-8 is actually a nightmare for Alutemu here.
Very much so. The lack of buffs certainly sting, but can at least get the Soul to Forest off. Lunar Eclipse, of course, very important to deal with that Ricard to make sure that the Rusty Raider doesn't get way out of control. Alutemu does end up getting the final trade. Now, from Lee's perspective, picks up Ringmaster Watley. Certainly a very scary board to think about the potential of Arbor Up. That is always the biggest threat when we start to enter this phase of the game. And so Lee could probably put an all-hands-on-deck approach with Bumper Car and Warmaul Challenger, trade even the existing Bumper Car to get the Dark Moon Riders and use a little 1-1 to pick things apart, or just kind of throw caution to the wind and say, I'm just going to Ringmaster Watley full send and try to prepare my resources for a comeback in the next couple turns.
It's really tough, isn't it? Because, like, at this point, what does Watley even draw? It draws Alex Straza, kind of pointless. It draws potentially a Sword Eater. And Crab Rider as well. Like, it's not feeling great, is it? In terms of just dealing with what's on board for Alutemu.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's feels great, and to make matters worse,
Ladies and gentlemen,
trading into the board makes it stronger, right? In a way. Alutemu really happy to see that Lee is not dealing with the board. Does find guess the weight so he can draw, but if he doesn't find something good, then all this board building would be a lot of showing. He whiffed. We didn't see what card he saw, but I'm assuming he guessed bigger because he just wanted something bigger. And he whiffed, and that's really unfortunate given how many 0 to 2 minute cards he's drawn so far. There's probably only a handful left, like probably less than the number of fingers on one hand.
And it's painful as well because the obviously the upper costs of cards are so strong for Alutemu right now, right? Like any of his higher cost cards do exactly what he needs it to do in this game, but didn't manage to get there, unfortunately.
I mean, now Lee has another chance to pull Blade Master Samuro. Good bumper card, then stage dive, find Samuro, clear off a bunch of the stuff. Now, that being said, Lee just got a ton of information about what Alutemu's hand really looks like. Alutemu's hand is either all ramp or all board building stuff, like another Glowfly Swarm or Thorngrove Sentries. There's just no other possibilities. He would always pull the trigger if he had an opportunity to play Pride's Fury, Power of the Wild, Arbor Up. And so maybe in his mind, he doesn't have to rush. He doesn't have to go too quickly here to try to find Samuro. Can take his time and maybe just pick apart the board bumper cards with Dark Riders.
Yeah, I was even looking at what Sword Eater bumper card does here, because he can Sword Eater bumper card and Darkmoon Rider. Looks pretty good, and I think getting the Sword Eater down is going to be pretty nice for him. Yeah,
I like it. Yeah, I like that idea a lot. Good optimization.
Reduces the board down enough to feel a little bit safer, right? Even if an Arbor Up comes down now, it's only 4 attacking minions this turn, and you have a taunt, so I guess 3 minions that can go face, and then maybe there's some cleanup potential next. We can see though Alutemu has not drawn Arbor Up, and suddenly this is looking a little bit rough.
You bring up a really good point. You know, the solar eclipse is also a possibility, which would have been devastating had it come out. So, very important observation on your end, and of course Lee agrees. Alutemu, I mean, this is the best that you can do.
Yeah, now the stage dive into Samuro will be clutch, right? Especially if he plays the second Thorngrove. If he really feels desperate enough. Okay, he's only going to play 1. Makes sense. Now, like, the troublemaker's big, right? I don't think with this board, Leaoh has to go for the Samuro.
It's a good question. You mentioned how many rushers were in the deck before we played the first one. Rakara has been drawn. The bumper cards have been drawn. So it's Overlord Runthok and Blade Master Samuro and the 1 copy of Crab Rider. So it's a 1 in 3 from what I count. It's taking the risk. Does not get the payoff. But Crab Rider still does a lot of cleaning up that you kind of want anyways.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, look at the hand, right? Crab Rider kills 2 things, Watermaul will kill 1 thing, and Bumper Car can potentially kill something else, right? Like, that's just good enough with what he has on board with Weapon Swing as well. I think he'll just try and clear as much of the board as possible and then secure with Troublemakers next turn.
I'm down. And I think that Lee has mapped it out really well, right? This was not the perfect series of outcomes, but pretty close to it, right? It's a very nice secondary backup in case the first plan didn't work out.
Yep, clears everything up with the help of that weapon swing, and now empty board territory. So even if Alutemu can make something happen here, which I guess he does have Gibberlin now, but even if he can make something happen, so what? None of it can attack, and then Lee can just be aggressive once again. But if Alutemu skips this turn, deeming it's not enough to warrant committing without a board-based buff, then Lee just gets a free troublemaker, which is probably the beginning of the end here.
Yeah, this is a miserable hand, to say the least.
What to do?
Lee has a bunch of, you know, bombs and nukes in his back pocket. Now Timo has plastic knives that you get at your local takeout store.
Yeah, not even good ones as well. Like, you know they're going to snap as soon as you use them.
Yeah. This ain't the top shelf ramen. This is the dollar store discount bundle that you get that the chopsticks can't even separate without breaking apart at the base. Ugh. Binds Pride's Fury, so I guess that's something.
Yeah, Pride's Fury with Solar Eclipse is going to put a lot of health on the board, but again, is it enough? Because not only does he need all that health, there's already so much damage on the board here for Lee. He can effectively Alex Strauss one of the minions away if he really wants to, right? Like, as long as the board is empty, your health against Druid doesn't matter.
Yeah, that being said, this is still a really intimidating board state here for Lee. I'm trying to think about... first of all, my instinct was, is there even lethal here? I don't think so. No. Okay.
No, because of the second taunt, right?
Right. There's some board space because I was thinking about conditioning Playmaker and bumper cars, and then could you like send everything face and like find an opportunity to pressure enough there? I don't think so though. Venomous Scorpion might just find the silver bullet. One brawl, and this game is won.
Interesting. I'm really surprised he went for that, right? He could have killed off, 3 minions this turn? And landed an 8/8? And then the two additional 3/3s from the...
Right.
The
I think in his mind, he wants to try and just to minimize the chances of dying this turn. And I think the spell to remove with a big AoE was his best shot. That being said, it's hard to kind of disagree with you, Raven. It does feel like there's this opening for Alutemu. There's 12 damage on the board, and armor up is enough. Alutemu, fanning himself, says, give it to me, give me the goods. That's a Pride's Fury! That's +4! 5 with the hero power, he did it! What?
Oh, right off the top. You've got to work out how likely that is. And I guess that was more of my point. Was it a higher chance to just clear off the minions with Alex Straza, land an additional 8/8, and just hope the buffs weren't drawn anyway? But I think one thing we can all agree on is that if Alutemu got Arbor up or Pride's Fury, that would have been dangerous no matter what he actually did there. So it was a tough one there for Lee to lose, especially when it looked like he held on for so long, only to be taken down by a last draw off the top there from Alutemu. So they're going to even that series up. That was a close one, Dan.
It was a super close one, and I would love to go back and screenshot that moment there, because was there a way for Lee to play around that? He was so close to stabilizing. But he did get to take a look at the Venomous Scorpion and potentially find the answer. But either way, you have to kind of, as much as the story might be about immediately our first reaction is, does Lee have a better play? You have to give props to Alutemu to play to that out, right? That was a situation where I think a lot of people would just feel like they're down and out in their luck. But this is what Token Druid can do And this was just a really strong series of plays from Alutemu to get the out that he was looking for and tie up the series. That was a monumental victory from Team number 2.
Yeah, it really was. It wasn't looking good for quite a long time there for Alutemu. And those are the games of Token Druid you normally lose when you've got no Fungal Fortunes, you can't draw through your deck, you've not got access to multiple buffs. It really is just a one card off the top because the deck doesn't often function well through one card, right? It's all about the combinations of 2, 3, 4, 5 cards worth in one single turn. So Alutemu got away with that one, and that win has opened up the series, right? Because if Lee got a win over the Token Druid, that means Lee only has his Token Druid to win 1 in 3 games. Like, you've got to say that's incredibly fortunate or in a good position for Lee to take the series. But now, all even, there's still Token Druid on Lee's side, but Alutemu's already got rid of one of his decks, so it's all up for grabs at this point, Dan.
Yeah, and after watching the highlight reel and getting to see that board state again, I don't feel like Lee actually had as many levers to turn as, potentially our memory serves. So I do feel like he made very close, if not the best possible play that he could do to survive, and just whiffed on what he found in the Venomous Scorpion Discover. And that happens at times. A little sad, though, because that was exactly the situation I was describing, right? Which is he's one-off tech cards to find a answer through a discover or a spell generation, and I was like kind of hoping that he would be rewarded for that, right? That would be a great deck building victory in a way, where the Venomous Scorpion found the brawl and he would get the dub there. So a little disappointed, but it happens.
I think really the play that would have kept him alive in that exact instance would be to Alex Straza his own face maybe at that point, and then trade off what he could. Then he would have gained 8, and the buff wouldn't have done as much. But honestly, like I said, against Druid in that scenario, you don't act like they're going to draw one of the best cards they could possibly draw, right? Especially already after seeing one. So I think it's fair to just take as much off the board whilst pressuring as much as possible for lethal the next turn. Seemed correct to me. And now Lee is going to be on his Druid, and not quite as clean a 2-of list as we saw from Alutemu. He is going to be playing a couple of those cards you mentioned, Dan, with the I've lost it now. Only one Pride's Fury and 1 Adorable Infestation, but the 2 Guidance in there to open up some more of those sort of out-of-the-box options, which seems to be an ongoing theme throughout Lee's lineup, honestly.
Yeah, and that's kind of just what is some of the hardest things to account for in tournaments, because everything else does things consistently. But when you start adding an X factor, there's just too many possibilities for a lot of players to consider. And so a lot of players consider the optimal play is to ignore that. In a situation where it's like you're thinking about Arbor Up, you're thinking about Solar Eclipse plus Prize Fury or Power of the Wild, maybe even like a tick of damage to Adorable Infestation. All these different things are floating in your mind when you go up against Token Druid. And then you start saying, well, what about Guidance? What can Guidance find? It's like, forget it. Just like, if he hits it, he hits it. I have to just play stuff. And that's the advantage of bringing those kinds of cards to the tournament, because it's just too much to calculate. You only get 75 seconds to figure it out.
Well, here we are. Let's go into this game number 3. And Lee, keeping the good card in Token Druid, that Fungal Fortunes is going to give him probably a lot more options to deal with in going towards that turn 5. Whereas Alutemu, deep in the tank here, Dan, working out how this mulligan wants to go for his Demon Hunter.
That's right. We're going to start things off with Lee with that card draw. Like you said, we didn't see that actually from Alutemu's side, which also makes his win even that much more impressive. Part of what Token Druid can do is just draw a ton of cards and just set up just never-ending waves of threats. Just constant inundating tree ants just coming onto the board. But that didn't happen, and now Alutemu has to go up against Token Druid with the Demon Hunter that didn't end up getting the job done. But that being said, has the card draw to really put things, get the ball rolling here. Has Acrobatics, has Skull Gul'dan, which should be able to get into a outcast position and can immediately even answer these Thorngrove Sentries with the Throglaive.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? Like, the Throglaive looks very clean, looks straightforward, but I wonder if Alutemu's ever considering just greeding it a little bit here, because these 1/2s aren't really a massive threat. I don't think it's fair for him to expect any kind of like big buffs on this board, right? Like, okay, you're going to really put down tons of buffs on 2 minions? Probably not. So yeah, I actually like this from Alutemu, because this Moarg will just challenge this board quite easily. It also makes Throwglaive better if it lives. It makes the AoE from Immolation Aura better. But honestly, I think it just generally is going to get some value trades and going to pay off a lot for Alutemu.
Yeah, all the reasons you mentioned, it's convinced me. So I think this play looks very nice here for Alutemu. A great spot to ensure that he can get even more value and fight back against the board with a card that he doesn't really need, and also free up that left side of the hand, because Skull Gul'dan on the coin, talked about it already a couple times this series. It's going to be important. From Lee's perspective, do you answer this at all? Or do you Fungal Fortunes and let it rip?
I think Fungal Fortunes looks really good, honestly. To me, the only reason to answer this is if you want to make a big board very soon. And I don't think Lee wants to. I think he'll want to Fungal Fortunes. Now he has access to a Glowfly if he wants, so maybe that's the plan. But I didn't think it needed answering this to... Oh, he took both as well. Germination.
Okay. So the way you can view Guidance is like it is card draw, but it only costs 1 mana now and 1 mana later. So it's kind of like 2-ish mana for two cards, except you don't really get to choose if you end up committing to those 2. Ends up conveniently landing on one of the best cards possible in Glowfly Swarm, so that's great. I think the Germination is just simply to pump up the Glowfly Swarm and not much else, because I can't imagine that it gets a ton of value copying 2/2s and 1/2s.
Right. And I think the important thing as well is the curve still works, right? He can Fungal next turn with the 3 mana he has left after the Overload, and then he can Glowfly on 5 anyway. So the Overload doesn't exactly, break the plan. Although now it would have done to an extent. Not that you would want to have innovated it out anyway. Reduces down the Glowfly. So Fungal going to come down. And, yeah, those are pretty good. Mainly for the Arbor up.
Yeah, and all of a sudden everything clicks of why Lee played the Guidance, right? Because turn 4 is a little awkward, didn't have access to a mana ramp source to get Glowfly Sword out early, so he could play Fungal Fortunes on 4, and now can just set up those waves that we talked about. So all this meticulous setup here from Lee is paying off, showing you again why he's considered to be one of those new waves of players. For a while, for years, as we do play the Glowfly Storm here on 5, for years it felt like China had all that potential stored up for being a powerhouse region, but you just hadn't really seen them break through. And also, if I could just, peel back the curtain a little bit, a lot of the top players in the West weren't that impressed with the top players in China for quite some time. And Lee was kind of marking that new chapter of Chinese players who had been making it to the global stage that really started impressing people with his play. And I think that you can start to see a little bit as to why that is. If you're catching up on modern-day Hearthstone, Lee still very much has it.
And now other teams got one of those tough decisions of he could clear this board very easily. He probably should and probably will clear the board. But just when that Immolation Aura is gone, it's gone. And it currently has no more AoE to back that up with. So if Lee, if this gets cleaned up and then Lee just drops another Glowfly Swarm, then Alutemu is in a world of trouble. So he's probably going to try and work out if he can lessen this without actually just dying.
Yeah, Kuras Ashfallen, Chaos Strike, Moarg cleans up enough to not make the Arbor Up and the possibilities to follow up hurt that much. I think the devastating thing would be a Solar Eclipse Arbor Up, but Lee does not have that.
Can go Adorable though, which puts the additional minion on, right? You can go Adorable Arbor Up for 1 push, but he's just missing the secondary token generation.
Now how about...
Yeah, I'm trying to think about what we can do for the max mana right here, because we do have 8 mana available with the double Innervate. So I was kind of thinking if there was anything else on the table besides Arbor Up, but I do like the Adorable Infestation Arbor Up play that you suggested. Ah, Soul of the Forest. Okay.
It's going to make a bit of a stickier board and hope that works instead.
Right, because the Arbor Up is still vulnerable to the same thing as the previous board was, which is Immolation Aura, but spell damage. And this is setting up lethal. So this is very smart from Lee.
I grow impatient.
Okay, so Alutemu has to figure out if he wants to use the Skull Gul'dan. And I mean, if you talk about Skull and Outcast position, it doesn't really get much better than this.
Yeah, pick your poison.
But the punish is so severe. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 damage on the board. Arbor Up's only plus 10, so it's actually not the lethal from Lee, but it's a lethal possibility if he picks up the Solar Eclipse.
Right.
Important distinction there.
I might go for the just the trade in the I-beam, kill off as many minions as possible. Does have to do it the slow way, working through all those death rattles, but again, he's once more just facing down 3 attacking minions, which is not too bad, honestly.
Yeah, agreed. I think that he's recognizing that Lee has the potential to kill, and sometimes that's just enough. And Lee got a lot out of that, right? He disrupted a turn 6 setup for Skull, which looked fairly obvious from the way Alutemu has been playing the hand. And so, in his mind, that was a big win, to take away a powerful turn 6 from Alutemu. Can he follow up with that now and do it again? Because every single turn that he can delay that Skull is not only, of course, advancing his own game plan, but also disrupting Alutemu from being able to flip it around and win out of nowhere. So that's going to be important. Lee thinking about the Fungal Fortunes, which if he draws the Solar Eclipse, would be a little bit short off the Arbor Up, but if he finds a Lightning Bloom, could do it.
Yeah, Luna's pretty nice as well. Can kill off the Kurt. Which means it's just more damage that can go face. He can trade off the 2-1 if he wants, but this is just a good amount of pressure. He's going to get the news that although Alutemu has looked like he's not at the AoE clears, he actually has with that Arcanist Immolation Aura. But still, any mana that Alutemu is spending on board clear, he is not spending on Skull. And that seems to be an ongoing theme for the past 2 turns, which is really limiting some of the more crazier turns that he can actually achieve.
This is wild that Alutemu might be down. Like, he's had Skull of Gul'dan in perfect outcast positions, and his hand at the end of this turn might just be half of his hand being Skull. If he ends up using like I-beam and the Immolation Auras and stuff. This is a this is an uncomfortable spot, to say the
I
least.
grow impatient.
I bet you can do this!
Alright, commits the Arcanist as well for the full clear. Okay. I wasn't sure if he wanted to throw that in as well, but he ends up doing it. And I think in his mind, he can't afford to wait too much longer, right? Because look at what Lee just drew, the Solar Eclipse. That would have been the end of the game, so... Good spot here from Alutemu to recognize what's more important, which is surviving. And Lee really trying to find a way to build back the board. The problem is now we have the inverse of what Alutemu had, which is Lee has board building cards, or rather ways to augment his board. His board building opportunities, like Glowflash Swarm, his Thoroughgrowth Sentries, and Gibberlings are not there. He could generate just straight up the Treant tokens through the Arbor Ups with the Solar Eclipse, for example. It's just not ideal.
Yeah, he could actually go Bloom, Power of the Wild for a minion, then... Wait, can he do that, or am I counting crazy numbers? Yeah, and then he can still, like, innovate Solar Arbor, right?
Time goes short.
Yes.
How about
Just to create a board, what, 5 minions buffed? Seems pretty good to me. You've just seen that Alutemu clearly held on to that AoE for a long time. He did commit to it. So now it's as likely as it's ever going to be. No skulls have been played yet. So Lee going for the board push. Decided to hold on to the lightning blue.
Alas, poor warlock.
But still, this is plenty of damage to threaten here.
Whoo! Immolation R number 2, drawn for Alutemu.
It's not good
He
enough,
is
though, right?
so close to feeling like he could stabilize here. Yeah, it's not quite. Crimson City Runner, does that change anything? Gotta give it a try. Yes, it can draw a Talented Arcanist, number 2.
They will never catch
That's
Yeah,
the
that would
draw.
help. Oh, the Moag, right? Do the job.
Short.
Oh, the Morag.
Don't see it, though. I think Alutemu is just dead.
Philosophy and the Immolation R to stay alive. Wow. That's just not going to be enough. Lee has the damage in hand a couple times over, and that's going to be game number 3. Token Druid getting the win on both sides. Alutemu taking his second loss. With the Demon Hunter.
Yeah, really big win there. That can be a tricky one for Token Druid, just because with the sheer amount of AoE, if you don't get that refill, we saw there that Lee had to refill with the Arbor up, with Solar. If he didn't have the refill straight away, you can see Skull gets played, more cards get drawn, another Skull gets played, suddenly there's AoE to deal with the next wave. And that's what the trick is in that matchup, and in a lot of these AoE-based matchups, is to have wave after wave, one after the other. You can't really delay it, or they'll have time to draw the extra removal. So good job there for Lee, going up 2-1 now and putting Alutemu on under a lot of pressure as they're both fighting for that 4-0 spot after round 4.
Yeah, overall, I think we're just really starting to see the Demon Hunter falter. I think the stats are starting to reflect that. Demon Hunter started off with a pretty solid win rate, and it just seems to be slowly ticking down with each passing round to just being a little bit losing across the board. Its best matchup right now is Paladin, and that's only a 9-game sample size. If you remove Paladin, its best win rate is itself, the Mirror at 50%. Everything else, it's like 48 though. So it's like, one of these things where Demon Hunter just slightly losing versus everything, and that's gotta feel frustrating if you're Alutemu, because you're contributing directly to that 49% win rate that it currently has, because it feels like you're the one losing and everyone else is getting the win.
Yeah, it's really tricky, isn't it? It's one of those decks now that, because it's good, but it's been around long enough that people know what to do, right? They know how to play around it. I think early on when Demon Hunter, OTK Demon Hunter was popular, people had no clue what it was capable of, right? So they didn't really know how they should then play into it. Whereas now, everyone's done it a million times. They know what to do, what not to do. But it looks like we are moving swiftly on to our next game. Alutemu on that Rush Warrior with that Mutinous in there at the top as the main addition to this list. And yeah, we'll just be looking to draw that Watley once more, just to be able to keep that pressure up.
Alutemu has that Rush Warrior, and I just feel like he's trying to avoid playing the Demon Hunter to get swept, because that would be the second time. Maybe it's me, Raven. Every time I cast Demon Hunter, it feels like it's getting swept.
Well,
I'm not sure.
It's also that fear that it happens to you as a player where, for example, if Alutemu keeps losing with his Demon Hunter, the blame will either go on the deck, or you start to question your own play, right? Because if you're just losing with Demon Hunter over and over again and doing well with the rest of your lineup, either the deck's bad, which we could talk about, or maybe Alutemu just doesn't have as good a grip on OTK Demon Hunter as he does in other decks, right? As he does of Token Druid, as he does of Warrior, Priest, and so on. As some of the decks he may have been playing more, or just feel more comfortable with, because OTK Demon Hunter is a very unique deck at the moment, right? There aren't too many other decks that even play remotely like it, so it's one you definitely need to put the hours in and feel very, very comfortable with.
Yeah, I agree with that. And a lot of the players that do bring it have put in that time. And yet we still feel like when we watch some of the best play it, that we're learning as well. Players are even saying, like, when they watch others, they're like, oh, that's so smart, because there's all these different situational things that you're leaning into and playing around.
Arise and
That being said,
putting
putting it on cooldown, we're going to the Warrior Mirror. Warrior Mirrors largely depend on who can get those stats rolling quickly, and you can see exactly what's going on. Alutemu keeps the conditioning, Lee keeps the Overlord.
Yeah, and this is one of the matchups where the additions of that Neophyte of the Ogremancer is going to be trash, because it just does nothing in the mirror, right? Like, Warrior doesn't really play spells into Ogremancer. The Warrior having spells cost 1 more for 1 turn doesn't really impact much. Whereas Alutemu has a much more sort of refined list with everything Warrior needs in general. So just feel a little bit favoured for me for Alutemu, so it's going to be feeling confident at least going into this mirror match, or close to a mirror match.
We've seen people play conditioning on 2, Raven. I mean, Parade Leader here is also totally fine. Do you have any thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, I'm very... Although I probably play conditioning earlier than most players in situations like this, but not above a Parade Leader. I mentioned this a little bit earlier today. Like, this is one of those plays that Warrior has, along with... oh my god, I forgot the name of the card. The 3-drop. The 4-3. Anyway.
Playmaker.
Yeah, there you go, Playmaker. I was going to say Parade Maker, and I was like, well, it's kind of what I'm getting at. It's one of the cards that has to be answered on curve, and when it's not, you are just so far ahead, right? And it's just an absolute problem for your opponent. So already Alutemu sticks to the Parade Leader and can start to bank on it. Even if he just ends up playing like Stage Dive Crab Rider this turn, it's still a relatively large minion that has to be dealt with from Lee. It's one of those weird effects where the minion you want to kill is sometimes the minion you can't kill, because it's only a 2/3. But for example, this Crab Rider couldn't get played, and then the Crab Rider's a bit of a threat because it's going to receive that buff, and then anything else you play afterwards is going to be a big threat because it receives the damage buff. So yeah, very, very tricky here for Lee to respond to this.
I mean, he's got the Overlord Ronthok ready to go. So
which one though?
to me,
Left or middle?
probably the one you keep, just because it makes it obscures the hand information a little bit more, because you kept that in your opening mulligan. And now Alutemu does end up getting to respond with a 10 Trasher. The damage has been done. Overlord Ronthok already got the buff. And now Sword Eater here looks really clean from Lee's side. Oh, actually, Parade Leader and Bumper Car also makes a lot of sense too.
Or even Crab Rider now, right? He can bump the 3/4 and then still go into the 7/3.
Yeah, all possibilities.
Or unworthy.
I think what I like most about Sword Eater is that it increases, like, you still get a lot of play flexibility with Parade Leader, and it improves because you can immediately trade your Bumper Car and then use it on the Dark Moon Riders as well. But it does seem like Lee's going to take the line that you suggested, the Crab Rider, which doesn't completely answer the board.
Right.
Does a pretty good job of it.
And it's if the Crab Rider on the other side doesn't trade back, then Ronthok can clean it up next turn. I just think the big deal there is tanking 7 is going to hurt a lot, even though I do like getting the weapon up.
Jeez, I mean, this is starting to look really hard for Alutemu to climb back from. He does have conditioning, which is nice. Also, a little caveat is that small little buff on the Crab Rider through the Parade Leader is huge, because Ronthok gets answered on board, 7 health, 7 attack on Alutemu's side, which means that Alutemu can conditioning and then develop, which is a huge thing in this matchup.
Yeah, I think he still has to go for it though, because he'll want to probably look at Sword Eater plus Bumper Car next turn, and that just fits with mana, so...
A diet high in
Gonna be Sword Eater into Sword Eater by looks things.
And this was a little bit of the concern that I had with the line that Lee took, because now he's just behind on board and he doesn't have a way to definitively answer the Sword Eater. And his one thing was that he had the coin to get a little bit ahead that one turn in terms of mana to snowball stats. If Alutemu was the first to play Troublemaker with additional stats, it gets really messy in the Warrior Mirror. So this pickup on the 10 Trasher also could end up just showing you like all the difference of having those rushers versus not, right? Lee's holding the tech cards. That's not useful in this matchup. The Ogremancer, the Venomous Scorpion. Alutemu's holding the normal good stuff. the 10 Trasher, right? The additional Crab Rider to get the extra rushers and improve the quality of your hand buffs. So this is showing you how Lee's decision-making to build his lineup in the way to outfit the Warrior to be better versus spell casting and slower matchups is not paying off here.
Right, I mean, even if we just oversimplify this, the tech card conversation of Ogremancer could easily be a 10 Trasher in Lee's hand right now, which would have killed the Sword Eater, right? So then you could just do that in a very simple manner, saying, yeah, the Ogremancer is now kind of just stranded in hand, because if Lee just plays an Ogremancer, Alutemu just ignores it and kills him, so then what else is there for him to do? This was just a ton of damage from Alutemu, and there's just no coming back from this for Lee.
Yeah, Lee's super dead. He just needs to find something off the Scorpion. Even if it was Rancor, I think it'd be too little. Blaze Orb's nice, cleans up stuff, but I don't think it's good enough.
I think you'd want like Bladestorm and Sword and Board. Like, can we fix that? Can we give him 2? Because that might help a little bit more.
Yeah, and funny enough, despite if he was allowed to pick both and play both, I still think he's dead, just on board. Yeah, it's not looking great here, Raven.
Yeah, really just strong answering turns there from Alutemu. Just got to head that little bit more, and it's a very, very tricky matchup in that it's not necessarily who sticks on board first wins. It's that combination of keeping tempo along with keeping up with the power curve of the deck, right? When you talk about conditioning, with Runthax coming down, Watley as well, it's if you can keep board a little bit, or at least keep the initiative, and keep up with that tempo or surpass it, then it's absolutely huge. And we see that now with Lee there, just not even being able to clean off the board, right? And even in these final turns, that 3-1 Murloc is still on board, whilst Alutemu managed to build on top of it. So really good win there for Alutemu, and it looks like this series is going all the way down to game number 5.
Yeah, honestly, like that game was just a lot of fundamentals in card battle games, right? It's not even necessarily just applicable to Hearthstone, but obviously when you talk about Rush Warrior dynamics, it's very much particular to what the current Hearthstone meta is. And so just a good job from Alutemu to recognize what's really important and be able to punish Lee for just being a little bit too slow. I mean, Lee got the double Runthok opening, which is really powerful, but Alutemu just being able to be one step ahead and capitalizing on what matters the most. So now we go back to the previous question we had, Raven. Is Demon Hunter able to get over the hump? I had no doubt that Alutemu, if he got the mirror, would have been okay. That's why he queued it up. He felt really confident in it. He was rewarded. Demon Hunter, though, I'm not entirely sure, man. This one could be dicey.
Yeah, it's tough as well because Warrior, I remember when this matchup first started kicking around and we tested it a lot for GM, and we quickly discovered that although Demon Hunter, of course, has the capabilities to win, right, especially with the good draws, the skull's nice and early, but Warrior, if it got conditioning down, the minions are just too big, right? Like Demon Hunter, as we saw in some of the Druid matchup, for example, like just managed to deal 8 with like a very good combination of cards. What was it, like 3 card combos just to deal 8 to a board? Well, that's all good and well when you token Druid and you make one big board, maybe two, but Warrior just puts like one big minion down per turn all game, it feels like, right? And Demon Hunter can't often keep up with that if the curve is good. And we also wind back to a matchup where Neophyte can be decent and Ogremancer can be impactful, with Demon Hunter obviously being extremely spell heavy. So already, even though I've got confidence in Alutemu as a player, I think Lee just has an advantage here going into this game.
All right, well, Alutemu already sitting back, deep in thought. Turn one here could have big implications if he just wants to pass or he wants to play one of his one-mana spells. Illidari Studies, even if he just gets a Crimson Signature Runner, pretty solid. I think the justification in Alutemu's mind is that his hand is really cheap. So even if he found a Skull of Gul'dan, he could play all of these cards and get to a reasonable Skull position in a timely manner. So I like this a lot from Alutemu.
And Lee deciding to take this a little bit slow, not wanting to coin anything out, has no follow-up otherwise. Well, okay, he would technically has 2/2 drops, but not really ones he wants to drop down quite yet. So I do like this approach. Like I said, it's not about Warrior, rushing down the Demon Hunter. It's more about Warrior hitting that point where they can just slam big threat after big threat after big threat and make the opponent have to spend Moargs, I-Beams, Arcanists to just kill single minions as opposed to big boards.
Ooh, let's melt some pieces.
Oh, ETC. I think in these kinds of situations you see like the parade leader, but with nothing to really benefit off of it outside of Rakara, he decides to just play the ETC God of Metal.
Yeah,
Can't help but note. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, ETC doesn't die to I-Beam, doesn't die to Chaos Strike Hero Power, things like that, right? Whereas Parade Leader could just get I-Beamed away, no problem, and so on. So ETC, you're not normally going to do big rush sort of combo damage late game against Demon Hunter. So I like it, because it's just a minion that will stick and maybe achieve something, especially with Rakara in hand.
True. The only caveat to that is ETC also doesn't do much. So it doesn't die, but it also doesn't really have big impact, and I think that's why Lee's like, just go and get him, champ. You got this.
Yeah. It doesn't die, but does it really live? Is the question it has to ask itself right there as we go deeper.
Yeah. ETC and the rest of the world population in 2020, I suppose.
Rakara will help, though, if he wants to go down that route.
Does. I think he has to at least think about the implications of this Moarg staying alive. There's not really much you can do about it, though, so I guess you're not thinking too much.
Yeah. It's a tricky one there, and actually just a nice play from Alutemu. We've not really drawn too much attention to it, but he's just stuck a 3/5, like kind of forget it's a Moarg, because Warrior can't really benefit from that, right? There's a lot of decks that can benefit from your opponent's Moarg, so you can clear it off easily, like with a Brain Freeze, for example, and so on. But Warrior doesn't have spells that'll deal damage to it. So that Moarg is really just very one-sided right now for Alutemu, and it's allowing him to keep the pressure on it and force Lee off board again and again.
That's all a good point here, as Lee goes fishing. Dark Moon Rabbit, not great. Rakara and Claw Machine, though. Rakara is definitely the most versatile one. Claw Machine gets me intrigued only by the fact that I think Lee's hand is quite weak. And I stand by the statement having looked at the Discover. The Venomous Scorpion really not giving Lee the goods. And clearly it was good enough to get to round 4 with a 3-0 record, right? These are players who've had success with their lineups. So as much as it might look silly in a couple of games in terms of the outcomes here, it's, you have to account for the fact that in context, Lee and Alutemu have done a great job to get to this point undefeated. But I just have to say that the Venomous Scorpion has been very whelming so far.
Yeah, it's not been fantastic, but again, there are certain matchups where it's insane, right? Even just dropping a Scorpion and saying, well, play a minion to this, I dare you. So we'll have to give it a bit more time, see how the build goes for the rest of the day and the rest of the weekend. But for now, Alutemu has achieved the pinnacle of Demon Hunter, going into turn 6 with a skull in outcast position. Oh, okay, well that changes things.
Conditioning in outcast position. Oh, but yeah, this is the opportunity for Lee to really make his tech cards hurt, right? We've been waiting for a time to play the Cult Neophyte. That was a pretty good time, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, if this turn isn't conditioning Cult Neophyte, then I don't know why Neophyte's in the deck, right? He gets it into turn 6. He knows there's no discount, there's no funny business that's going to go on to make this skull get cast. Which looks good to me. And it preloads. Like, look at the turns going forward. Playmaker, Rakara, Parade Leader that are buffed from conditioning. Like, that is a terrifying board.
Agreed. Like, what? That does seem like this is the way for Rush Warrior to get the win. I think Lee might be thinking about, what do I best use my other mana for?
Nothing, because he wants to coin out Troublemaker, is my opinion of things. But we'll see. Maybe he disagrees. Oh, he's going to mine? Oh, okay, he's going to minefield coin Neophyte, sure. If he's going to use the coin, that's probably the best use to clear off the Moag, but for me, I think I would have just stared at that Troublemaker that's buffed now, of course, and thought, what if I just coin that out on 7? What does that do?
Well, the good news is that Alutemu can't draw Skull Gul'dan with his double jump. Bad news, of course, is that double jump, if it gets cards like Spectral Sight, makes the Skulls a little bit clunkier to play. Finds an Eye Beam. That does work pretty well with Bloodmage Thalnos. Like, he's just going to use the Ethereal Aug Merchant instead. Set Thalnos and hold on to the Eye Beam in case he needs it for additional removal. And Force could also be a combo piece.
You aren't even ready for this. I'm not too young to fight.
Just getting out the double trade available if he wants to go for it. I imagine he wants to protect that Playmaker, so although it always feels bad to like trade that 1 health Rakara in without it buffing, but protecting the Playmaker is very, very important. My only worry now is this turn from Lee is that because he used the coin earlier to kill off the Moag, then he has this floating turn a lot of the time.
We'll see. I mean,
maybe Scorpion saves the day.
Incredibly explosive hand. Alutemu needs to start counting lethal opportunities. He has a free Moarg.
I grow impatient.
And also, if Illidor's already finds Philosophy, he could copy that 0-minute Moarg. So the Philosophy hits 1, 2, 4, 12, plus an Eye Beam. Be 3, 6, 12, so it'd be 24. He's close. Well, not exactly clean though, because the Skull's in the way, and also Il'gynoth is full costed as well. Hopping over back to Lee's perspective.
I think it's just Nitro Boost. And just use it as deal 2 damage, right?
Guess so.
Don't wait for a weapon, use that, maybe press Hero Power, push damage face, and then hope the Troublemaker pushes the game over the edge. If Cutting Class was playable, if there was 5 mana for Lee this turn, great, draw some cards, but in general, I think he should just bank the damage while he can.
Yeah, I think damage is the name of the game here. I don't think you can justify playing too slow here. Your opponent has drawn to 20 cards. Your board is starting to look very intimidating. Lee is also separating his board. I actually don't mind playing the Parade Leader just to make the Fell Screen Blast a little bit harder to hit the right targets, but in his mind, I think Lee just wants a reload opportunity. A second Fell Screen Blast? Is that it? No, I think he's still a little bit off. He doesn't have spell damage. Spell damage is what really... Wait. The discount. The discount on the I-Beam. 4, 6...
I see.
Trying to draw? He's using the expensive Moarg because if he finds Philosophy, he's going to get the free Moargs.
But now what?
So he has Arcanist plus the Il'gynoth plus the free Moarg plus the Fell Screen Blast. It's not enough because it goes 1 to 2, double to 4 to 8, so that's 24. If I count correctly.
Time grows short.
He's 2 damage off.
Pay for my discretion.
He's just going to clear off this board, or at least what he can of it, and try and survive. I doubt he's going to use the second Fell Screen Blast though, because if he does, it's going to be incredibly difficult for him to get a win.
Well, Alutemu had a good chance to put Lee at a very low life total and try to see if he can get there anyways. And now the board has even leveled up. That being said, he's still looking for an opportunity to just copy the Moarg Artificer. That Il'gynoth being on the far left is trolling him at this point. Acrobatics can just start things off for Alutemu to draw cards. Finds more spell damage. Uh-oh.
Yeah, Arcanist still doesn't get him there, right? He only has 6 mana now.
So, Il'gynoth, Arcanist plus Moarg. So it's +2, and then you double it, so it's 6. 6 times 3 is 18, plus the swing with the weapon is 22.
Yeah, just a little bit off.
And then attack was 24. He's still back at 24. What? How does everything keep adding back to 24? He needs to stay alive, by the way. It can't go understated that if he's, he doesn't use his Fell Screen Blast, he's gonna die.
Okay, well, there's Fell Screen Blast. Number 2 being used. Board cleaned up here. Alutemu alive. He does have that I-Beam. He does have Philosophies left, I believe, as well. So there is still a way he can do enough damage. Lee only on 26 right now, and not super high health total at all. Very, very doable.
Doable might be a strong word to use. I think it is very narrow here for Alutemu to get the win at this point.
These old bones just keep moving. Wretched story. Lose. Ultimate Potem.
Ogremancer. The good news for Alutemu, he still gets some breathing room. Once more, it felt like he was just a little bit off. Throatglaive, not that useful here. Do you just straight up draw the rest of your deck this turn? You can just Acrobatics. You don't have to Skull. Acrobatics, then Raging Fell Scream, and next turn you have all of your cards. That's one way to approach it.
Demons.
He's used both of the he's used both of the Soul Screen Blasts. What the most important thing is that Alutemu does not have the ability to copy this Moarg Artificer with the Philosophy. That's the most crucial aspect of his hand right now. He needs to find a way to duplicate it. He's just not finding it right now.
I grow impatient. Not many cards left.
Finally,
there's one.
It's a Moarg.
Time grows short.
In almost a cruel twist of fate, he doesn't want to actually draw 2 more cards. If he plays both the Immolation Aura and the Philosophy Disturb, but it do be like that sometimes.
Yeah, I think the second Alutemu who's drawn his deck in this kind of circumstance, the game ends one way or the other anyway. So...
Oh dear, Raven.
Oh
Dear.
Oh.
Okay, well.
I was going to just carry that on with you then.
It's time for Lee. It's time for Lee to play this Ogremancer, I think. Well, honestly, it just really comes down to what can Alutemu do, right? I apologize, I don't have the deck tracker in front of me, so I don't know what the last card is in the deck. But unless it's the second Philosophy, I just don't think he can get there, right? Let's count.
Right.
Moarg times 2 plus a Talented Arcanist is 3. It adds +2 spell damage to the I-Beam. So I-Beam goes from 5 to 10 to 20. And that's just it. No, he doesn't have damage anymore. He can't do it. Am I misunderstanding?
I'm going to stay with it again. I'm giving Alutemu the benefit of the doubt here, but this doesn't look like enough. Normally when you kill with I-Beam, like 30 or above, you've got to like... I've seen more things than just 2 Moargs, but I could easily be wrong here. He's going to do it.
The good news is that he has a big board, right? Like, he has to get there through minion pressure now.
Right.
Like, that's the name of the game. That's a very optimistic perspective. Playmaker, Overlord, Runthok, plus the bumper cards. I mean... Part of the annoying thing is that every time you bump into Il'gynoth, you take the damage. But I mean, that's gonna be the game. Concedes. Lee takes the win, 3-2. Some questions coming about Demon Hunter or the OTK Demon Hunter. Personally, it's so easy for us to say, but clearly he should have set him down to 2 life and try to take it from there because that was his best chance to win. But it's so hard to spot that window because in Alutemu's mind, he was pretty close to being able to find a way to win off the top of his deck. So I completely understand, but I mean, that's kind of the nature of this deck, right? That's why they say it's really difficult because it's very punishing if you're wrong and your windows can be airtight. You have to be very on point.
And the hard decisions are very hard. It's, can I use my second Fellscream Blast? Can I even use my first Fellscream Blast if you only got 1 in hand? Like, when to use Immolation Auras? Because the resources are so tight in terms of what the removal is, what the burst damage can be, knowing what you can throw away and what you can't, just... it's the whole deck almost, right? There's no mechanics of card draw and everything like that, but really having good judgment skills on what you can afford to dump and what you can't makes or breaks games. And we saw that maybe Alutemu was a little bit too liberal with his use of Fellscream Blast, because if you look